Sunday was supposed to be simple. Groceries, lunch with mom, and maybe a quiet evening alone. My life wasn't dramatic, peaceful even. That's what I thought as I parked outside the store, grabbed my reusable bags, and stepped into the sharp smell of lemons and fresh bread. I wasn't in a bad mood, but I wasn't in a good one either. My mom, Denise, had just had hip surgery, and I'd been running errands for her for weeks. She insisted on paying me back down to the cent every time, no matter how many times I told her not to. She raised me on her own after my dad left, so I owed her more than I could ever repay. Helping her wasn't optional, it was my duty. The store was quiet, the kind of lull between the early church crowd and the Sunday rush. I was halfway down the frozen foods aisle, scanning shelves, when I felt a light tap on my shoulder. I turned, expecting someone to ask about oat milk. Instead, a woman I didn't recognize gave me a polite smile. "Your daughter is beautiful," she said. My heart skipped. Daughter? I didn't have children. I told her so, my voice sharp with confusion. Her smile faltered, eyebrows knitting as she looked past me. "She's been following you since the park," she said, voice lower now. "I thought she was yours." I froze, slowly turning. And there she was. A little girl. No older than 5. Brown curls tied back with a scrunchie, a faded purple sweatshirt with a unicorn, clutching a stuffed bunny by the ears. Her wide eyes locked on mine. "Can we go home now, Mommy?" The words sent a chill down my spine. She reached for my hand, small fingers curling around mine like they belonged there. I shook my head. "Sweetheart, I'm not your mom." But her grip didn't change. She just nodded, as if she knew better. The woman who'd spoken to me shifted awkwardly. "She's been walking behind you for a while." I thought. Her voice trailed off, apologetic. I thanked her for pointing it out, but the unease in her eyes matched the unease crawling up my throat. The girl pressed closer. "You are my mommy," she whispered. Too calm. Too certain. Other shoppers had started to glance over. My cheeks burned. This looked wrong. I didn't want to frighten the girl, but I also didn't want anyone thinking I was abducting her. I crouched down, trying again. "What's your name? Do you know where your parents are?" Nothing. Just a blank stare. A waiting stare. Something in her gaze told me this wasn't random. And then, as I stood up, pulling my phone from my pocket to call security, a thought struck me. What if this wasn't about the girl at all? What if this was about me? Because someone wanted me framed. The little girl's words, "Mommy," were too rehearsed. Her silence too deliberate. I remembered something Mom had once told me when I was younger. The cruelest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who know where to stick the knife. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't coincidence. This was revenge. My ex, Ryan, had once promised me I'd regret walking away from him. He wanted kids, I didn't. Our breakup had been ugly. He had connections, money, and a knack for manipulation. And now here was a child, planted in my path, claiming to be mine. All it would take was one witness, one phone call, and I'd be branded something vile. I tightened my grip on my phone, my mind racing. If this was his plan, then I wasn't going to be his victim. Not this time. I led the girl carefully toward the front desk, my pulse hammering but my face calm. Security needed to hear my version first. And when they did, I'd make sure the truth was louder than whatever lies Ryan thought he could buy. Because if he wanted to play games with my life, dragging innocent children into his twisted revenge, I'd make sure he paid. Slowly. Publicly. And with a kind of humiliation that would follow him the way this little girl had followed me. After all, betrayal doesn't always end in heartbreak. Sometimes it ends in payback. And this time, I'd be the one writing the ending. I kept my steps measured as I guided the little girl toward the front desk. Every nerve in me screamed to let go and run, but I didn't. Running would look guilty. Running would make me the villain in someone else's story. The security guard glanced up as I approached. He was young, maybe mid-20s, leaning lazily against the counter until he saw the girl's hand wrapped around mine. His posture straightened immediately. "Problem here?" he asked. Before the girl could speak, before she could repeat the word mommy like she'd been trained to, I jumped in. "Yes," I said firmly. This child has been following me since the park. I don't know her. She claims I'm her mother, and I am not. The guard's eyes flicked between us. The little girl, unnervingly calm, hugged her stuffed bunny and murmured, "She is." Whispers spread from shoppers nearby. My throat tightened. This was exactly how Ryan wanted it to look. I leaned in, lowering my voice for the guard. "Check the cameras." She was behind me when I entered the store. "You'll see." The guard hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." While he disappeared into the back, I crouched to the girl's level again. "Who told you to say I'm your mommy?" She blinked. Silent. But her eyes darted, just for a moment, toward the entrance. And there he was. Ryan. Standing just beyond the sliding doors, pretending to scroll his phone, but watching. A slow burn lit my chest. He hadn't just wanted to scare me, he wanted me destroyed. He wanted me branded a criminal. But if he thought I was the same woman who used to flinch at his threats, he was wrong. The security guard returned. "You're right. She entered the store alone. She wasn't with you." Relief nearly buckled my knees. The murmurs from the crowd shifted, suspicion rolling away from me and toward the girl. Or rather, toward whoever had put her up to this. I seized the moment. "That man outside," I said, pointing to Ryan's shadow at the entrance. "He's the one you need to speak to. He's been following me for months. He's my ex." The guard looked. Ryan, realizing he'd been spotted, turned to leave. "Stop him," I shouted. 2 more guards moved fast, intercepting him before he could vanish into the parking lot. He protested loudly, but the more he yelled, the guiltier he sounded. And me? I stayed calm. Cool. Almost smug. Because I knew exactly how to spin this. By the time the police arrived, I'd already woven the story, an unstable ex trying to frame me, using a child to stage a false abduction. My clean history, my job, my quiet suburban life, it all made me believable. Ryan, red-faced and raging in handcuffs, looked like every bitter ex in every cautionary tale. The little girl was taken into safe hands, but not before she glanced back at me, confusion etched across her small face. She'd been a pawn. And in a twisted way, so had I. But not anymore. Because I wasn't going to let this end in a police report and pity. I was going to ruin Ryan the way he tried to ruin me. Court battles? Fine. I'd drag him through them until he was broke. Restraining orders? Done. I'd stack them like bricks around his life. And every single person we knew, every mutual friend, every colleague, would hear the story of how he used a child in a revenge plot. His name would be synonymous with shame. I walked out of that store with my head high, the whispers of strangers fading behind me. Ryan thought he'd orchestrated the perfect downfall for me. But he'd underestimated something vital. No one plays with fire without expecting to burn. And I had just found the perfect match. The cops pulled Ryan away that afternoon, but I knew better than to believe it was over. Men like him always slithered back, one way or another. The kind who thought charm was currency and cruelty was power. He'd find a lawyer, spin another story, and paint himself as the victim. But this time, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. The first step was silence. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I didn't even acknowledge his existence online. To Ryan, silence was worse than shouting because silence meant he wasn't controlling the narrative. Instead, I started talking to people. Quietly. Casually. Our mutual friends, old neighbors, even people he worked with. I didn't accuse him outright. No, I planted seeds. Strange thing happened the other day, I'd say. Ryan was hanging around the grocery store where this little girl wandered up to me. Security thought it looked suspicious. That was all it took. Eyebrows raised. Rumors grew. By the 3rd retelling, Ryan wasn't hanging around. He was lurking. By the 5th, he wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time, he was involved in something with a child. I didn't have to exaggerate. I just let human imagination do the work. Then came step 2, exposure. Ryan prided himself on his reputation. He worked in sales, where charm was everything. So I created a little trail. Screenshots of old threatening messages he'd sent me. Copies of emails where he'd admitted to following me. Even old voicemails where he'd lost his temper. I didn't release them all at once. No, this was a slow drip, each leak timed perfectly. One anonymous email to his boss. Another concerned message to his HR department. A quiet tip to the PTA of the school his niece attended. By the time Ryan figured out where it was coming from, the damage was done. His job was shaky. His social circle had thinned. His own family had started asking questions he couldn't answer. But I wasn't done. Step 3 was the final blow: isolation. Ryan thrived on control, but I made sure every door he tried to open slammed in his face. Landlords wouldn't rent to him. Friends stopped returning calls. Prospective employers Googled his name and found whispers, stories, shadows of the truth I'd let slip. And all the while, I never broke a sweat. I visited my mom, did her grocery runs, kept my head down. To everyone else, I was the dutiful daughter, the quiet neighbor, the woman who minded her own business. But behind that calm exterior, I was dismantling a man piece by piece. And the best part? He knew it. Every time we locked eyes in court, every time he saw me sitting there calm and collected while his lawyer begged for leniency, he knew. He knew I was the one who had taken everything from him. He wanted me to regret leaving him. Instead, he regretted ever crossing me. Revenge doesn't always come loud, with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it comes quiet, like a slow poison, until one day the person who tried to ruin you looks around and realizes they're standing in the wreckage of their own life. And when Ryan finally hit rock bottom, alone, broke, and despised, I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just turned and walked away. Because the greatest revenge isn't watching them burn. It's knowing you lit the match and left them to the ashes. Months passed. By then, Ryan's life was little more than smoke and rubble. He'd lost his job, his apartment, most of his friends. Word had spread further than I'd even intended. Whispers don't obey borders. They slither. They multiply. But men like Ryan never accept defeat. They always think they've got one last card to play. It was a Thursday night when he showed up at my mother's house. I'd just dropped off her groceries, apples, chicken, her favorite dark chocolate, and was tidying her kitchen when I heard the knock. Not just a knock. A pounding. I froze, then looked through the window. Ryan. Disheveled, eyes bloodshot, his once expensive jacket hanging off him like a costume he couldn't afford anymore. I stepped outside before my mom could answer. "What do you want?" My voice was calm, steady. He laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "You think you won, don't you? You think you can ruin me and just walk away. You ruined yourself, Ryan." His jaw tightened. He glanced back at the street, and only then did I see them, two of our old mutual friends, lingering by a car. He brought an audience. Of course. His last move wasn't violence. It was theater. He wanted to turn the tables, to humiliate me in front of people who might still believe him. "You're sick," he shouted, loud enough for them to hear. "Dragging a child into your twisted lies, pretending I had something to do with it. You've destroyed me." The two men shifted uncomfortably, unsure who to believe. For a moment, Ryan looked triumphant. That's when I pulled out my phone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply pressed play. The recording was clear. Ryan's own voice from months ago. "You'll regret this. I'll make you regret leaving me. You don't want kids? Fine. I'll make sure everyone thinks you stole one." The words hung in the air like smoke. The two men by the car went pale. One shook his head and muttered, "Jesus, Ryan," before climbing back into the vehicle. The other followed. They drove off, leaving him alone on the curb. Ryan's face collapsed, fury giving way to panic. "You set me up," he hissed. "No," I said, pocketing the phone. "You set yourself up." I just let the truth breathe. For once, he had no comeback. No threats. No charm. Just silence. I turned, opened the door, and walked back inside without another word. Through the window, I watched him stumble down the street, shoulders sagging under the weight of his own ruin. And that was the last time I ever saw him. People always imagine revenge as fire and fury, a grand explosion. But the truth? The sweetest revenge is colder than that. It's patient. Precise. It's letting someone choke on the poison they mixed for you. Ryan wanted me broken, begging, ruined. Instead, he's the ghost of a man, remembered only for the lies he told and the life he lost. And me? I still buy groceries on Sundays. Still take care of my mom. Still live quietly, peacefully, on my own terms. Because the ultimate revenge isn't just watching them fall. It's walking away free while they drown in the ashes of their own fire.